Namaste to this session of the weekly dialogues, and this is the second session in the series that we are doing with Dr. C.K. Raju on the history and philosophy of science and mathematics in India, and also how to decolonize this. So we have Dr. C.K. Raju with me once again. You already know him well. Yes. Namaste, Dr. Raju. Welcome
Namaste,
once again.
namaste.
I don't think I need to introduce you again. The people who have seen the first session would certainly be going through directly to the second session. Just to recap a little bit, that we were in the first video in this series. We were discussing about how the Western philosophical constructs were introduced into Indian mathematics and science, and how it was utilized to kind of own and possess the entire subject of mathematics and thereby science, because mathematics and science are inseparable in that case. So Dr. Raju, carrying on from where we left off, at last we were discussing about the Shulba Sutra and Pythagorean theorems, and we also discussed about Vedanga Jyotish. And you came to the subject of the numbers. Can we discuss these numbers and see how far backward this European and Western mathematics has been, contrary to their claims of superiority that they have been making?
Okay, so we want to look at numbers. I think that, as you say quite rightly, numbers are the basis of science. Now, the oldest source that we have got for numbers is the Yajurveda. And I am not talking about Vedic mathematics, I am giving you a specific shlok in the Yajurveda, which is, okay, yeah, let me show that to you. Let me show that to you. I need to share the screen. So, this is Yajurveda 17.2. Yajurveda 17.2. Where has it gone? Shukla Yajurveda. Okay. So I want to show that to you. This is the second verse, 17.2. And maybe this Sanskrit doesn't make sense, because this is Vedic Sanskrit and it has all those accent marks, so you may not be able to read it. So I can also show you something else. I can just show that same thing to you in different, in the form of ordinary Sanskrit.
Okay.
So I have a tab on that. Yeah. So where has it gone? Or maybe it is here. Okay, let me. Yeah, so here it is. So you are able to see it, right? Shall I make it
zoom it in?
larger? Yeah, I can zoom it. Yeah, yeah. How is that? That's okay?
Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay. So what it says, and this is something quite interesting, it's very simple. Just eka cha dasha cha. Ek hai, das hai, dasha cha, shatam cha. So, shatam cha, sahasram cha, hazar. Sahasram cha, ayutam cha, 10,000. Ayutam cha, niyutam cha. And now this becomes, it goes from 10,000 to 100 times. No, 1 lakh is only 10 times. It goes to 10 lakhs.
Okay.
And then it increases by 100 times. There is Arbudam, which is today called Arab. There's a slight difference. So this Arab doesn't come from Arabs, it comes from Arbudam. But we have stopped using it. Then there is Nyarbudam, then Samudra, Madhyam, Antya, not Anantya, Antya, Prat. So these are 12 powers of 10. Now these are all quite big numbers. And this Shukla Yajurved is a very old text. So there are several things that are being used here that you need to read into this. One is that this is a geometric series. It's a place value system. So 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and so on. You can go on in that fashion. So you have. Oh, I'm sorry that you were right. Ayutam, yeah, it goes 10 times only over here, not 100 times. I'm sorry. Ayutam is 1 lakh. Okay, you are right. Okay. So this goes on in this fashion, increasing by a factor of 10. So this is a place value system. Now, once you have a place value system, you naturally have to have 0.
Absolutely.
You have to have 0 because if some place is vacant, then it has to be read as 0. Now, whether you have a symbol for it or not, now this, people are mucking up the issues, saying, okay, there was some archaeological symbol for 0, now it's found here, found in Cambodia, and so on. That's completely beside the point. The moment you have a place value system, you have to have something to represent 0. Maybe a blank space, maybe a symbol, doesn't matter. So that's one point. And the other point is that these are extremely big numbers. Now, to illustrate that, let me also go to the other source. See, supposing somebody were to ask you today, you give me names of numbers beyond 100 crores.
Okay.
Right? So, now if most people are asked this question, you give me names and numbers beyond 100 crores, our journalists will never use anything beyond that. They won't say Arab. They are afraid, what is this Arab? So they will say, 100 crores, okay, 1,000 crores, 10,000 crores, lakh crores. So they will again go on and on in this manner. They don't have specific names.
Otherwise, we were taught when we were in school, Arab, Kharab, Neel,
Kharab,
Padam,
exactly.
Shank, Mahashank.
Correct. So those names have kept changing somewhat. These are the names in Vedic times. Now you come down to the time of Aryabhat, they have changed. Come down to the time of Bhaskar too, they have changed again. So there is a slight change. The first 4 or 5 places are the same. But the method is still the same. The names may change. Method is still a place value system. Now what exactly you call it is not very important. It's not the crux of the matter. It's not part of the mathematics of it. It's just the nomenclature. So exactly that is what was taught, Arab, Kharab, and so on, but it's not used anymore. So the point I'm making is that it requires a certain level of mathematical sophistication to be able to deal with such large numbers. Okay, so as I said, even our journalists today, they don't have names for it. They don't have, okay, trillion, they will understand maximum. Okay, but beyond that, they have a problem. So let me give another example, and this is from what is called the Lalit Vistar Sutra, or Lalit Vistar Sutra, whichever way you like to pronounce it.
Lalita Vistar Sutra, I think.
Okay, there are difference of pronunciation between Pali and Sanskrit and so on, right?
Yes.
So, because they pronounce it, as far as I know, as Vistar. I don't know Pali. So, Sanskrit term is obviously Vistar. So, let me go to that. I need to share the screen, I forgot. All right, share screen and Chrome tab. So, yeah. So this is the thing. It's in chapter 12. Are you able to see it?
No, not yet.
Not able to see it? It is on my tab. It should be showing, and it says sharing to be stopped. Not able to see it?
Not yet.
Okay, let me try again. Share screen, share Chrome tab, and share. Are you able to see it now?
Yes, we can see it now.
You can see it, okay. So this is a test that the Buddhists put to by a mathematician named Arjun. It is not the warrior of the Mahabharata named Arjun.
Right.
So mathematician named Arjun, and he says He's calling him Kumar. That is when the Buddha was very young. Can you name the numbers Koti Shatuttarana? Koti Shat. Koti is crore. Shat is 100 crores. Uttar.
100 crore.
After that, after 100
Yeah.
crores. So please name the numbers after 100 crores.
Right.
And the Buddha goes on giving the numbers. So here is the text of, and if you can read this, so you have still the Ayut and Niyut, but you have Koti. Or maybe if you
Koti.
can read better in English, what would you prefer? This is the English translation. So now this goes by hundreds. 100 times 10 million is a billion, and 100 times Ayut is Newt, and 100 times Newt is so you see these things have kept on changing. It's not necessarily 10 times each case, it may be 100 times. That
Yes,
was
but
what
the
was
place value system is still there.
Yeah, place value system is still there. The numbers are going by increasing by 100 each time. So you have lakh, and then you have crore, and so on. So it is increasing by a factor of 10 raised to 2. And then there are all sorts of names. So there is Kankar, there is Akshobhya, and there is Karafu, and so on. All sorts of things.
10 to the power
Ultimately, it
53.
ends with 53. It ends with Talakshan, which is 10 to the power 53. So 10 to the power 53 is huge. And if you were to ask somebody today to start naming these numbers beyond 100 crores, they will not have specific names for them. Now, what kind of math? See, you have to have a very sophisticated mathematical system which throws up such large numbers. If we look at the Romans or the Greeks, what was the largest number of the myriad? It's 10,000. You couldn't count beyond that. So if you look at if you look at the Roman system, so it's so primitive. And the Romans thought the Greeks were primitive, which is also correct. They were even more primitive. They had a similar system. So you can't count. How do you write a number like 10 raised to 53 in the Roman system?
No
I
way.
mean, imagine C. And you can invent names. You can invent a notation, but it's post-factum. They had no way of doing it. So if you start writing X, C, your life will be gone by the time you finish writing 10 raised to 53 in this standard Roman system. So this is the problem, that they did not have any use for such large numbers because they did not encounter them in practice. We had some use for it. We were counting time, we were counting many things, we were doing astronomy, and because you have large, you also have very precise fractions. So, for example, when you talk of Kali Yuga and so on and so forth, you're talking of very precise fractions. Or if you talk of even square root of 2, you talk of very precise fractions. And those, large numbers means precise fractions, means better science.
Would you also like to talk about the experimental method in ancient India and the experimental method of Francis Bacon? And they said that, okay, the ancient India did not have an experimental method at all.
Absolutely. So this is the other part, that not only they mixed philosophy with history, they were terrible cheats. They terribly distorted things so badly just to make the claim, oh, you are inferior, oh, you are inferior. So the way to contest it is not to make wild claims ourselves, but to break all their claims. They're completely false. So let's take a look. That's a very good thing about the experimental method. So I have an article on this in the print. Let me just give you a glimpse of it, that was there an experimental method in ancient India. So this should be, okay, let me share that. Scientific temper in ancient India. All right, so this is an article in the print. I just did a Google, so it should just come up with me. Okay, here it is. And it is, yeah, so here's a portrait of Francis Bacon, and because he's supposed to be the founder of the method. All right, so let me, instead of going to read through the article, which of course anybody can do if
see the
they
article.
want. Oh, you can't see the article. Oh my.
Not yet.
Okay, let me try again. Let me stop. I thought it was visible because at my end it became visible. Chrome tab. So, gone. Here, share.
I think there's some problem. There's some problem. I think we
So
just lost him. Yeah, it's coming
it
back.
crashed. It crashed. Google crashed. Google Chrome crashed. Not Google.
Okay.
Chrome crashed.
Chrome
When I was
crash.
trying to share the screen. It has a bug. It says it has a bug when you share the screen. So this might happen a couple of times. I don't know. So let me try now again. Share the Chrome tab. Now I hope it will come out properly and not crash. Please don't crash. Okay, are you able to see it now?
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay, so this is the article. And let me just illustrate what I was trying to say in the article,
The article is by
which
whom?
is article is by me.
Okay.
It is
Thank
also it is by me because I've been trying to explain this, and it is also there in the 11 pictures of time in the starting thing, but it doesn't make this point because you see each individual point needs to be made about experimental method. These guys have said in India there was very much the experimental method, and now the source is this Digha Nikaya.
Dirgha
Can you
Nikaya
see it?
Sutta. Yes.
Digha Nikaya. Right? So
Digha
these
Nikaya.
are the long discourses of the Buddha, and there is a Payasi Sutta in this, chapter 23, and this is the source, so it's a very strong, valid source, and it has been discussed and so on and so forth. So what you find there is that this Payasi, he performs experiments with dying people. Why? Because he's skeptical about the claim that okay, you die, you'll go to heaven or hell. If you do something, then you will have a better life and things like that. He's skeptical about it. Being skeptical about it, he performs experiments. Simple experiments. He goes to some people, some good people, and says, okay, after death, if you go to a good place, please come back and tell me. He said, nobody ever came back. Then he goes to some bad people. He's having a dialogue. He's having a dialogue with a person called Kashyap, who is a Buddhist monk and who is countering what he says. So he goes to bad people, and then the bad people also, nobody ever comes back to tell him. Then he will, for example, take a person, weigh him, strangle him with a bowstring, weigh him again. See, don't kill him by stabbing him or doing something because some blood may go up. So weigh him before death, weigh him after death, and kill him in such a way that nothing spills out. And there is no weight. So he says, soul has no weight. He says, okay, maybe you are missing something, maybe it is visual. So put him in a pot, seal the pot, eat it till the chap is dead, then make a small hole and watch whether some soul is coming out. So it is pretty ghastly, but it is an experiment, very direct experiment being done. It's an experiment being done about the notion of life after death, about the notion of soul. Now maybe they are not valid experiments in the sense that they are not properly designed experiments, but they are experiments. An experiment being used to test religious beliefs is something Francis Bacon did not have the guts to do. He writes in his Novum Organum that the best way to get rid of superstitions is the gospel.
Which itself is a superstition.
Yeah, he says that. So the reference is given in that article. So,
That brings us to the question of the epistemology. That the epistemology that we have been following in India has
yeah,
always been based on pratyaksha pramana, whereas the
absolutely, absolutely,
epistemology
absolutely
in the
right.
West has always been Shabda Pramana. So it's
It
not
has,
valid at all.
yeah, yes, and this Pratyaksh Praman is accepted by every school, be it Nyaya
Every
Vaisheshik, be it
yes,
Sankhya Yoga, be it Advait Vedant, whatever you call it, be it Lokaya. There is no distinct to that. They accept it is valuable, but they accept it because that's the best thing that we have got.
absolutely.
And they also accept reasoning, they also accept Anuman, although Lokayat rejects it for good reason, and I think that is connected to this decolonization of math. What is the problem with deduction? You see, Anuman is something weak. Anuman lagana. It's almost like, somebody is making a conjecture or something like that. It is weaker than Pratyaksh. Pratyaksh sits in front of you, it is solid. Maybe an illusion sometimes. Might mistake a rope for a snake or a snake for a rope. But most of the time, it is very solid evidence, which is not the case necessarily in Anuman.
Even for Anuman, actually, a lot of people, they say that it is point number 4. It's not even Anuman. It is what is called Artha Prapti, which is equal to deduction. Anuman is inference,
It is
which
the
has
same,
a
correct.
basis in direct evidence.
Yeah, it is inference, but it is the second because you see, Lokayat rejects that. Buddhism accepts that. That is how we calculate that you have these 2 systems accepting it, 3 systems accepting it. Finally, you come to Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman is the last. So there is also, you have analogy, which is not accepted by everybody. So Upaman and Upaman is not accepted by everybody. It is used occasionally and it can work beautifully. For example, Aryabhat's analogy, the earth is like a kadam flower. So man has its uses, and but it is not precise. If people start thinking, is it like a kadam flower? Then why doesn't kadam flower decay? Why doesn't it decay? So if they start taking it too literally, it creates a problem.
Can we now go to the post-Ashoka period and look at how things proceeded in the post-Ashoka period, from post-Ashoka to Al-Biruni, and we probably may start with Aryabhat or earlier.
That is a little more complicated. So when we are looking at Aryabhat, I think we come to Aryabhat, the important issue as regards Aryabhat, because I may need to display some of the stuff, and it is just a little bit complicated because first of all there is this notation which is a peculiar notation which is not used, and there is a question of, it may take some time, that's what I'm trying to say. So let me try and give the gist of it, okay,
Right.
instead of getting involved with all these equations and so on. Today, when we talk of so-called trigonometry, see, Aryabhat's big achievement was the calculation of his 24 sine values. And I'll try to explain why it is such a big achievement. So today when we do, we call it trigonometry, and if you ask somebody what is the definition of sine of something, they'll say opposite side upon hypotenuse. Now this is a very bad definition because I ask people, what is sine of 92 degrees? Okay. If you have one right angle in a triangle, you can't have 92 degrees in the other. So then they don't know what to say. They say, there's something wrong with him. Why is he asking for sine of 92 degrees? There is no opposite side. So they are not related to triangle, they are related to the circle. The difference is that triangle is made with straight lines, circle is a curved line. And it is perfectly understandable that all these functions are circular functions, because the concept of pi, what is called today pi, because that's the name by which it's best understood, concept of pi is related to the circle, not to the triangle.
Right.
Right? And so it's only in that context, in the context of a curved line, that in the context of a circle, that you can start defining mathematics. All right. So you have these functions. Now, if you try to derive these sine values geometrically, the way people do in school these days. To do geometry, you need symmetry. Right? So it's very easy if I'm talking about all angles being, I mean, if you have two sides equal. So if you have two sides equal, it should be 45 degrees. And if it is 45 degrees, then you know that your sine and cosine are just going to be the same. And so you can easily calculate it as 1 by square root of 2, because the sum of the squares is going to be equal to 1. So it's 1 by square root of 2. It's very easy because there is symmetry. Right? You have 45 degrees and there is one symmetry. So likewise, if you take 60 degrees and 30 degrees, there is symmetry. That's an easy case to calculate. And as a matter of fact, in school, they stop with that. 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees. So 30 and 60 are interchangeable. It's just one triangle with 30 degrees, one angle, and 60 degrees, another. And one right angle. So that's what they stop at. 0, 30, 45, 60, 90. These are all the values they stop. And this is terribly, terribly out of date. Out of date by 1500 years. So the geometric method, what I'm saying, is constrained. Now Aryabhat does give a geometric method. On the circle, says you divide the circle into so many equal parts. Now once you divide it into equal parts, you get different angles. Because the angle is not considered as two straight lines. Right? You have two straight lines. Where are they? All right. So you have two straight lines. That's not an angle. An angle is the arc. That little thing you draw in between. That's the angle. It's a curved arc. It's a relative length of a curved arc. It is not two straight lines. You muck up everything. See, angle is does not, you can't translate it as cone. It's a wrong translation. It's a translation which begins from the Rekha Ganit of what's his name? Who wrote this book on Sawai Jai Singh asked him to write this book. I'll get the name in due course. He is the author of, he wrote this Rekha Ganit sometime around 1723 or so. Samrat Jagannath. So
we have this Jagannath Yantra here in Jaipur.
okay. Yes.
Samrat
The
Yantra,
Jantar Mantar.
Jagannath Yantra. Yes, we have this in the Jantar Mantar.
Jantar Mantar. So same Sawai Jai Singh, of course, who had hired him to write, and so he coined this word because he was translating the elements of so-called Euclid from Farsi to Sanskrit. And that is the word we use today. But that's not the word that was used earlier traditionally. Traditionally, it was a chap. The chap is a curved line. So, for example, in this so-called, when you see the same sign values given by Madhav, so he will say Nyatya chapa vargena chapam tattat palani cha, and so on. It's the chap term that is used. It is not theta, it is not. Right? So circle, not triangle. Anyway, the next point is that what Aryabhat does, and that is the revolution that he created, he does it numerically. And the numerical technique is actually very simple. It's very simple. It is absolutely elementary, and that is why it reduces calculus, makes it so easy. Simple trick is what is called the rule of 3. See, supposing you want to calculate sine of 1 degree. How will you calculate it? Now, if I ask my students, they have not studied. Nobody told them how to calculate. So I say, all right, you know sine of 0 degrees, you know sine of 30 degrees. How will you calculate sine of 1 degree from this knowledge? So that also they have not learned. Basically, it's a technique of interpolation. Now, in this interpolation, what we are doing is that we say, okay, sine has changed by this amount in 30 degrees. From sine 0, which is 0, to sine 30. So, by what amount will it change in 1 degree? Divide by 30. Take the change, divide by 30. You know what's the rate of change. Very simple, isn't it? It's just the rule of 3. Or if you want to do it for 2, by what amount will be, what is the unit rate of change? And then you multiply that by 2. 5 or 10 degrees, whatever, any point in between. And that is simple linear interpolation. It's a very simple technique, rule of 3, which we study in primary school. Now, this is all that is needed. And what you get is the difference You're taking sine 30 minus sine 0. And you're dividing it by 30. That's the what is called the finite difference. In calculus, you muck it up by saying, okay, you let this go to 0. You're not mucking it up. You're just taking a finite difference quotient. Okay? But you will want to make it small. Why does he want 24 values? Because he wants to make that divisor small. If you take 30 degrees, you have larger inaccuracies. If you take the divisor small, you have smaller inaccuracies. Of course, maybe if you make it very small, there may be larger inaccuracies. If you do it on a computer, make it very small, it will overflow. Treat the very small number as 0. So those are separate complications. But by and large, if you make it so 24 is a reasonable number. You make it small and then it works fine. And so you are able to interpolate. Now you are also able to extrapolate. The same principle, you are able to extrapolate. If you just know the rate of change at a point, you can calculate what is going to happen later. Exactly the same technique. So that is what is today called Euler's method of solving ordinary differential equations. It's attributed to Euler. Now these cheats, whenever they attribute something, say they have this big doctrine of Christian discovery, something can only be discovered by Christians and friends. But they said even Vasco da Gama discovered India. Where were we? He discovered us. So, because only a Christian can make a discovery. That's their rule, that is the fatwa of the Pope, that's the law in the United States. The Red Indians ceased to exist, ceased to have any hold over land once they were discovered by Columbus. So it's a very vicious kind of a thing. It's not just false history, it's very bad ethics. And they do this kind of thing, and they claim we discovered it. And we did something different, some little thing different somehow, like vaccination. You had inoculation and you have vaccination. Hey, is somebody a fool to give you a smallpox inoculation if you are going to die? Obviously, it has to be modified. So this kind of subtleties are broken. Anyway, let's go on with Aryabhat. So Aryabhat does this as extrapolation. And he has now a technique, if you do it by extrapolation, it's exactly what is called Euler's method of solving differential equations, ordinary differential equations. And he notices, you see, if you make a table, and then if you keep taking differences, and there's a word for it, Khandaja. Khandaja is the difference of the jars. And that is where Bhaskar also comes in when he talks of Khandaja, and he says, Khandaja in the past, and Khandaja in the future, and Tatkalik Khandaja. Instantaneous. So that's the velocity, instantaneous velocity. So this is calculus because basically what is calculus, people don't understand. They think it's about integration, differentiation, yin bang. Now if you ask them what is the derivative, they won't know. So what is the derivative? They will say tangent to a curve. What is a tangent? They will say tangent just touches the curve at one point.
I'll tell you an interesting anecdote.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that all of us, I was a science student, science mathematics, and I did calculus in my 11th and 12th at that time. And then, of course, I did engineering, so I was doing calculus all the time. And I passed out, did quite well. But I didn't know why I was using calculus at all. For that matter, a number of other techniques, why they were being used, nobody told us in the beginning. They just told us, okay, this is the formula, this is like this. You do this, and this happens. Exactly. Why you do it, nobody teaches. So for the benefit of our lay students, can you tell them why do you use calculus at all?
Let's just give you a simple example. I want to calculate sine values. I want to calculate sine values precisely. So I want to interpolate. So to interpolate, I am going to have to use the rule of 3. And the rule of 3 brings in the rate of change. Very simple. I want to do this calculation. And it can be applied very widely. I want to interpolate. I want to extrapolate. These are very common requirements for any kind of calculation. Okay. So I was going back to this conceptual misunderstanding that calculus is just a bunch of formulas. Because they start with formula. They don't start with the calculation. That I want to calculate this. I have got a tree, I want to calculate its height. So I'm not going to get sine of 45 degrees exactly. I'm going to get some sine in between or tan in between. So I need to know the value of that function at that value. I want to calculate the radius of the Earth. for requirement. I want to calculate latitude, longitude, so many things I want to calculate. And these are very important things once upon a time. I mean, today you may use a GPS and things like that. But these were important calculations that had to be done. There was no GPS those days. So for all these things, if you don't know the radius of the Earth, then your navigation fails. This is something that Brahmagupta says. That what does he say? I'll get it in a minute. Bhuvyasasya jnanat vyartham deshantam. You don't know the radius of the Earth, and then you are trying to find your longitude. It is foolish. And there's a big problem with longitude, precisely that the British had. That was where their science started. That is where their Royal Society started. That's where the French Royal Academy started, to determine longitude. It was the biggest problem, navigational problem that they had. And it happened because they could not do the radius of the Earth. They could not calculate it because they were not good at trigonometry. They copied from us, but they still could not calculate. So they had the wrong value, and it's a very simple thing. So many people died. I think that's a very simple application. Right?
I think I'll have to stop you at this point, because the time for this session is very nearly over. Yeah. And of course, there's so many things that we have to talk about. So we'll continue with that in the next session. That we also have to see the case studies related to Aryabhatta and the origin of calculus. So friends, if you like these series, and if you like this video, please do like, subscribe and share, and we will be back with Dr. Raju in the next session. Thank you very much.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.